So this is a game called Virginia, which I wrote the music for a couple of years ago. The game is a narrative story game. It's an incredibly authored experience where everyone has the same experience who will play the game. I sort of think of it as like an interactive movie. You play through the main character's eyes in first person, and you walk through the story and interact with objects. We took a lot of inspiration from cinema, so we cut the player from scene to scene, and we don't use any dialogue at all to tell the story. So there's a lot of leaning on the music to sort of explain what was going on as much as possible, getting inside the headspace of the main character. So I thought it'd be cool to use music which sort of spanned long sort of amounts of time and would evolve in real time to events that were happening. So it's sort of like how you might sort of score a film that was reacting to events that happen. The problem with doing that in a video game is that you don't have a locked edit, because the player is controlling the edit, if you like. They are controlling when we cut, when a event happens. And so we had to look at ways of allowing the music to be more interactive. And I'm going to show an example, a scene from the later part of the game where we use quite a few different tricks in the interactive music system, like timing swells to cuts and specific animation moments to occur when a music changes in some way. So what I'm going to do is play through a scene from the middle of the game. I'll sort of talk through some of the creative decisions of what I did, what I was thinking when I made these decisions. The game has supernatural elements, so you'll see in a moment that something strange happens that she can't really understand at this point. So that was a piece of sound design that I had the music start underneath. So that was kind of just the in point of the music. The idea was that the player's thoughts now is a bit of confusion and not really sure what's happened. So there's sort of a strangeness whilst you're looking for this pendant, and you might have just caught that there is a visual effect to guide you towards where this pendant is. And what will happen now is that I'll interact with this pendant and it will play a short music burst that will lead us into the next scene. So now I've interacted and the music is preparing to change. And that was synced to the music there, and that was one of the tricks that I was talking about earlier. So now she's in this scene in the bar and she's sort of wondering what to do. Does she give the pendant to her partner and apologize, or does she follow her career and, you know, spy on her but get forward in her career? So she's deliberating. She opens up this pendant and she gets an idea that actually the whole investigation of your partner is about her mother, and the mother's, and this is a reminder for her that she can investigate her partner's house that she's been to before. So now there's a feeling of determination that she wants to go and grab this information, and she's going to give it to the FBI, and she's going to rat on her friend. And this is an illegal thing she's doing, so there's an amount of trepidation here, I suppose, and this is now just looping around, and I could stay here forever and it would just loop indefinitely until I interact with this door. And then it changes when I enter with this handle, when she realizes that someone might be watching. It's actually this time. So I synced it to that camera move. So now she's a bit worried that she's actually breaking the law here. And so this is a segue into being inside the apartment, which is now, I guess, a bit more tender that she's actually going to do this, and she's back in this house which she was in earlier in the story, and she's going to break into this secret room. A lot of this won't make sense if you haven't played the game, I'm afraid, but so I'm trying to sort of give a little bit of context about what's going on in the music. So there's a music change there when I interact with the door, but it will sync up to this animation. And then another change here to sort of make a moment out of her finally going into the office. And this music will just loop around. Really, what's going on in this music system is it's going from like an A section to a B section to a C section. So it's really structuring the music, eye of the player, and telling the music when to change section to progress in the timeline of the music. And the interactive music system just controls how that works and at what point does it change. And really the gold standard, what you're trying to do is when you interact with the game, you want it to interact, you want the music to interact, to react to it straight away. So for instance, when I click here, it will straight away go into this piano line, which is ideal, but it's not always possible to do that, depending on the type of music that you're currently in. And I'll talk about that later when I go into the software. So this is kind of like ideas forming, the plot thickening. That picture is actually your boss. And so you realise that your partner's been investigating investigating the director of the FBI. And that was sort of the last interactive moment, so this actually is really just on a timer. The music is guiding the story. The cuts are timed around the music in this section, and it's really just to sort of give a feeling that she's nervous about what to do. Should she rat on her friend or not? And then this is actually a separate cue now, so I'll end this part here. So this is the software that we use to implement all the interactive music and sort of keep control of it all. It's called Fmod. As I was saying before, I sort of think of music as being, interactive music as a series of sections that are just looping around, and when we want to tell the section to move to another section, the computer and this Fmod software will determine how it then transitions from section A to section B, and then that will loop around, then how does it go from section B to section C. That is pretty straightforward. If you have a piece of music which is free form and it's just lots of sustains, then you can just bring elements in and trigger it to come at any point, and it won't sound like it's out of time with the music. But when you start having music which has more of a definite rhythm and pulse, you need to take that into account. If you just had like a pulse like that, then at any point you just sort of then transition to another section, it would sound jarring. And so one of the cool things about Fmod is that you can put the tempo of the track, build it into the software, and if you see here, we've got the beats here, so it knows as long as that is the same as what your music is, then it will know at what bar in the music track you're in. So we can do stuff like, rather than transition at any point, transition every 3 bars, say. So this is what we do here. There's these green points, the transition points, so it will only transition when it gets to one of these bars. So I could be playing through here, and then I would click on something in the game which would say, okay, change, and then it would just wait until the next point where you could do it, and that'll be there. So those are the 2 fundamental ways that you do it. This would be an example of a free-form piece of music which can transition at any point. That is the easiest one to deal with because it means it's more responsive. So I'll play this beginning bit, which is the same piece of music from the example that I showed. And this yellow box, it looks like a door in some way that is playing, that, you know, this might be playing like some MIDI line or something, but actually it's just a container for a piece of audio. So this, in here there's a drone, and if I just open it up, you'll see that it's just a looping piece of audio, and I've done that because it's just me trying to loop around the audio, and actually there's another one inside. So there's a nested drone inside there. So basically it's playing a drone which has a tail, and every, I've worked out that amount of time, it'll just trigger every 21 bars or 22 bars, it looks like, it will trigger it again. So basically it just means that as long as this clip here is over the timeline, it will play that drone just forever. Whereas these clips here are the same, but they don't have, this one's they don't have loops inside them, so it's just a one shot, it'll play it once. So on the main timeline, when it goes past there, it'll play it once. When it goes past another one, it'll play it once again. And I've lined it up so they're 1 bar loops. Well, not loops, they're 1 bar pieces of audio. In this case, it's just 4 beats. And so I'm chopping, when I'm writing music, I'm chopping the audio up and bouncing them out so that you get the tail end, so that when we eventually transition to somewhere else, it doesn't sort of cut off the music directly. We're hearing like the whole tail. So I'll just play show how this is working. So you'll see here that there's another line of music that comes in when this clip is triggered behind the drone. So it does have a meter to it, but it feels quite sort of sustainy and flowy, that I feel like I could just interrupt it at any point and it wouldn't sound wrong. Some transitions you can have what's called, actually I don't know the official term, but I sort of call it like a setup time. So when I tell the music to transition, it will have a point called a transition time, which it will do something and then it can fade. So it can play like a clip of audio and then it can fade the previous clip of audio, and that's sort of what I'm doing here. So when I transition, it's now changing. And it's gone to this white clip here, Rode has. This isn't going to be a tutorial about how to use Fmod, but just hopefully some of this sort of makes sense. So you can see the clips are now playing and then they're finishing after 4 bars. And this will just keep on going until I change the state to say transition again. This is really the way that we're interfacing with the game. These values are changed in computer code, and that is what's feeding back to Fmod to say do something, and it is usually transition to a place. So now you can see that the timeline is just in a loop, and that's cool because it means that we can just wait for the player to interact with the game to tell it to do something. So every bar, so when I interact, it will wait until that green transition point is in frame. So if I do it now, it'll wait around and then go. So now we change tempo, which is something that you can do. This is playing a setup for if you remember in the game, you're looking at the pendant, and it synced up with that crescendo to the cut. And if you see, there's no loop region here because this is something that I'm just playing once, but then it goes into a loop region. So you can do stuff like that. You can, a section can be something that plays once and then goes into a looping section which has more control. So now these have shorter phrases, so I can more easily get out of them. If you can see that I can change at every bar, whereas that lyrical sort of moment beforehand, the phrases stem sort of 3 or 4 bars. So to interrupt a phrase of music would mean it might not sound very good. So that's one of the trade-offs if you want to sort of have quick interaction with the game, is that you decide how long can your phrases be. One way of dealing with that is to have some long phrases, because you want long phrases in music because you might want to do that because you're writing music, but you also are making a piece of interactive music which has to work with the video game. So now when I transition next, it's going to wait until this green line. Actually, let me just check what the... So these numbers don't necessarily need to be sequential. I'll probably change that at some point. So now it's... There we go. And there's the transition pickup time as well. So this is when she's opening the door. And we so it's another thing that's cool. There's got automation here, so I'm cross-fading up this this piece of audio here, and this was the sort of rhythm section that, if you can see, when it went down here, it sort of faded down, and now it's at 0, and now the loop is looping around where this is still at 0 dB. And really, I could have just ended, I could just brought this back here, because we don't need it anymore. But so this is a really boring bit of music, but luckily in the game, you would press another button pretty quickly. So when, if you can hear, there's no meter here, so it can just instantly transition. It's got a transition region rather than one of these transition points, which will wait to the specific time. This will do it anywhere in this region. So if I go to 8, now it's started the next section. So it's sort of more of the same, really, that we've got these phrases split up into these boxes, so that I would be bouncing out that flute line. I would sort of bounce that out as an isolated thing, and this would contain the sort of, I guess, the backing track, if you like, the high sort of tremolo strings that you're hearing, and the sort of the piano parts. In the perfect world, this section here would wait for the phrase to finish, but the game demanded that the music react to the game instantaneously. So I had to just decide, do I sacrifice not having long phrases here, or do I just do something a bit sort of cheap and crossfade down? And that's actually what I've done. So you'll see, I'll play it when the phrase is midway between the point, and you can see that when I do the transition now, it sort of just fades down, but you kind of get away with it because it's going into another sort of sustainy piece of music. So I thought that on balance, that was totally fine. It meant that we had the response time, which we really needed, because it was at the point when you interact with the door, and the alternative to doing that would be that you interact with the door and then the game just hangs around before the animation does anything. And we do that at other points in the game, which is, you know, probably the wrong way around. I mean, Virginia is definitely a unique case in that sense, where the music is sort of driving a lot of the game and the timings. More likely in other instances, it would be the other way around, where the music has to sort of fit in with the gameplay is king. But in our case, it was the story was king, and so whatever whatever sort of gave best results for making the story sort of seem more interesting. In this case, using music, we sort of protected that. Broadly speaking, some of this might not be applicable to other games, but I guess you can sort of see the potential of what interactive music can be, at least. Again, this is like a similar situation to the other section we had, where it's just looping around on a sustain. It makes it much more easier to deal with, because now I can just transition and it'll do it straight away. I do quite a lot of this. And now it's into this. Again, it does a one shot to have this moment where you go into the secret room, and now it's in a loop. I wanted to maintain some sort of control over. I didn't want it just to transition between a beat at a random arbitrary time. I wanted it to at least be locked to a beat, and that gave. I mean, you can see how long it takes for a beat. It's like maybe like a second. So there's a second of time where the game doesn't know whether it's in sync with the music. And I think for the next section, which is picking up this photograph of that was on the wall, it sort of seemed fine. It didn't need to be like really in sync. And then we can always get back in sync afterwards by sort of delaying a fade to the next scene, or like holding on an animation idle is something we did a lot. So this will sort of take us to the last section, which is this is the most primitive form, which is just a raw audio file that's not even contained within a clip, because it doesn't need to trigger anything, because it's just playing the audio file. And so that's what's going to happen when I think it's 9. So then the piano music comes in, and that will just go all the way to the end. So I think that's really the sort of basics of what this cue sort of encompasses. A few different techniques of what we did, and so there's unique situations demand sort of unique sort of solutions, but I think with a lot of video games, there's no one's written a book on all of this. You have to kind of just make it up as you go along and hope it works. And that was sort of what I did. I mean, I'd never used Fmod really before, and there wasn't a lot of documentation. There's more documentation now, but a lot of this I was sort of imagining in my head, like what I would need to do in order to make some of these systems work. And yeah, that's it.